Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Our first map here looks at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. And as that frontal boundary stalled out from Texas clear to lower Michigan, we did see several locations here that saw between 6 and 12 inches of rainfall out of this. We did notice that the main frontal boundary did slide to the south and east with time, and as a consequence, there were several regions across the country that did not get intended rainfall. I'd like to show you that. I think the easiest way is to take this map and remove everything below an inch. So this is what we end up getting. And you notice that you get to the north and west of that line, pockets in parts of Iowa and Wisconsin, this region of the Ohio River Valley, here in this area. All of those areas had much more precipitation forecast than actually fell. And that was a consequence of the models not stalling out the frontal boundary properly in this area and getting the proper feed of moisture coming onto it. And that's what we ended up getting. Now, to add to this, I'd like to show you a series of maps that do kind of a before and after comparison. And the first one here is our June 1st through June 18th total precipitation ranks by climate district. This is the area that we had seen the drought region expand dramatically out of the northern plains into the middle part of the country, into the western and central Corn Belt, while we stayed so very wet to the south over to the southeast. Well, this map again goes from June 1st to the 18th. This is now what that map looks like when you include the last week, or last 10 days, June 1st through the 27th. Substantial improvement in these areas, but I want you to take note of parts of Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota. Those are areas that needed much more rainfall out of this than what was received. It's drier in parts of Montana and Idaho, and of course very dry in the Pacific Northwest compared to normal. Same thing for parts of the Northeast. Another way to look at this is to check out the soil moisture maps. Again, back on the 18th here, let's compare what this map looked like then to what it looks like now. So again, we're going to flip back and forth here. This is the 18th of June. This is now all the way to the 28th. That's our soil moisture percentile, 18th, 28th. And again, it's this area that needed much more rainfall, as did Montana. And of course, we know we're in the dry season in the Northwest, but you can see here then in the Columbia Basin, the Willamette Valley, the Blue Mountains, this area here, the surface soil moisture values, down to 16 inches, is below 2%. But flooding in through this area, we still have flood watches out posted for this area as more precipitation is expected. You can see it by looking down at our latest satellite imagery. If I go back in time this morning, the pattern is really not adjusted too much. There's wide open flow from the Gulf of Mexico. There's still a frontal boundary sitting in through here. And in addition to that, we've got a couple other things to talk about. First, we've got a tropical system we're dealing with here. Early this morning as the sun was rising, you'd see the circulation from Tropical Depression 4, the main convection still to its west. But as this made landfall here, middle of the day, some of the bigger storms popping on this are really putting out some very heavy rainfall rates. Outside of that, these scattered storms? You can see all of them popping up here on satellite. Good news is we don't see a lot of wildfire smoke spreading in the west, despite some of the extreme heat there. We'll talk more about that in just a few moments. In the tropics, we are keeping a close eye on this next system here, where over the next 5 days could be coming through the Lesser Antilles, heading toward the island of Hispaniola, while Tropical Depression 4 over the next 24 hours moves inland, just like this. Winds are kept below about 30 to 40 miles an hour for Tropical Depression 4, and it's going to be a widely scattered rainfall event. But I do want to take a closer look on where the next easterly wave could end up. Because if it does make it through here in the next 5 days and shows up by the end of this week, possibly somewhere over the island of Hispaniola, the Greater Antilles here, then we'll just need to watch. Does it make the turn to the north around the big high that's been sitting just east of Bermuda? Or does it possibly get into the Gulf for future development? I want to watch this one very, very carefully. Next, let's go take a look at what some of our high-resolution modeling is showing here through the next couple of days. I was just looking at Tuesday here, but let's step back. This would be this evening. So what you notice is just a lot of scattered convection on that open Gulf of Mexico moisture transport. And you can see, if you just notice here, this is where Tropical Depression 4 moves through in the overnight hours. And then tomorrow, just more scattered storms on the Gulf moisture, with the main frontal boundary sitting right about through here on Tuesday. We don't have areas where we have high threat of severe weather through the middle part of this week, so just a lot of scattered storms. But as you can tell, once we get out there to Wednesday, that front is moving farther to the south, and as a result, it's going to change our precipitation patterns moving forward. What's got this all set up is this massive ridge sitting over Washington. It is displacing the jet stream pretty far to the north. There's a downstream trough here. Fed on Gulf moisture, we're getting all of those storms in this particular area. There's also another ridge here over the northeast, and that's what's keeping the temperatures very high right now. Now this ridge flattens and spreads out, and I'm going to show you the implications of that on not only our near-term but our long-term temperature and precipitation patterns. And to do that, why don't we go take a look at this graphic. It shows us the behavior of something called the Pacific North American pattern. It's going up to 6 standard deviations by the time we get to the middle of this week. 6 standard deviations above the average. That is the size of that ridge. But as you notice, from now through the 4th of July weekend into the next week, we are seeing the P&A values drop down below 0 once again, which means we're going to be replacing a huge ridge over the west with some troughing. And that's something I want to be talking about, trying to see what that's going to give us, because right now our latest forecast from the European model through the next through the next 7 days from the 0Z run is painting this picture. In fact, we should be getting right about now. Let's see if we got it here. There it is. There's the update from the 12Z model. Now, what we see here is that there is a large section in here where higher pressure is advancing and drying things out. But with the frontal boundary sliding farther and farther to the south, this is going to leave a tail end of it over Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, very wet. It's going to push some of that moisture farther to the south and east. Now, in my extended video I recorded earlier, we didn't include the 12Z, and overall, it's still a very similar picture to what we saw, but let's go ahead and update this one to get the 12, there it is, there's the 12Z GFS. And the net effect of this is that the GFS is wetter than the European across a broad sector here, but still, both models are suggesting the same thing happening. So let's go take a look at it, and perfect, got the 12Z GFS, or excuse me, ECMWFN. Now what we're going to watch here as we play through Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday, did you see it? That frontal boundary is moving by the time we get to middle of the week farther and farther toward the east. It's still fed on a lot of Gulf moisture, but higher pressure is building in behind it. And as we then stretch this out into Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and evening, that front now moves just like the 0Z run had it farther to the south, leaving the tail end going up the high plains. So very similar runs to the 0Z run. This is now Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon and evening, and now let's get into the 4th of July. You can see there's the Sunday morning, Sunday midday, and Sunday evening. So very similar overall. The front is a little bit farther to the south, but this is the area we're going to watch for those, as we often joke about, the natural fireworks farther to the south here, maybe extending up into the plains as well. So putting that all together, let's now get the update from, there we are, perfect. This is total accumulated precipitation through the middle of this week. So we've got Tropical Depression 4, stalled out frontal boundary, but then watch as I go from Wednesday into Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, that advances farther to the south, and we're looking here at total accumulated precipitation through the next week, shaping up just like this. I'd like to add to this another view, and I want to show you the probabilities here of getting another 2 inches of rainfall through the next 10 days. So this is from the European ensemble. Now the 12Z is not yet finished. We've only got the 0Z in, but it's going to look quite similar based on what I just showed you there. And overall, there's a broad sector that if you are south and east of that line, the chances of getting 1 to 2 inches is quite high over the next several days. But let's look at the opposite end of this. I'm now going to show you the probability of getting less than a 1/10 of an inch of rainfall. And now you see that the west, Canadian Prairie, Montana into the western Dakotas, the chances of getting meaningful moisture into this area is very limited as we look out there longer term. Now speaking of longer term, let's now examine the flow of the atmosphere. There's a pretty unique thing that's going to be happening here. You see, if I step you back to the end of this week, there's our large ridge advancing to the east. And what's happening out here in the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea is we're about to switch places between this ridge and this trough. And as that happens, see, by next Wednesday, the 7th and 8th, the ridge now comes here, the trough comes into the negative P&A, but the jet stream is displaced pretty far to the north. And what we're going to end up getting here is some ridge-riding thunderstorms. That is also echoed in the ECMWF. And therefore, this is an area that's going to be kind of having flow coming off the ridge, plowing into wide open Gulf of Mexico moisture. And what you end up getting is this pattern. We tend to favor drier conditions here, but the storms begin in this direction and spread through the Great Lakes states and parts of the western Corn Belt. Meanwhile, the Gulf moisture is fed in through this area, and that is why we continue to see this region showing up wetter than normal. Now, on the temperature side of things, June has been very, very hot west and north. And this is a temperature pattern I think that's going to persist in the near term. Because right now, about 2:30, in fact, let's get an update on this. I pulled this off at 2:30. Where are we now? We're about 3:40. There we go. Look at these temperatures. Holy smokes. Yakima 102, Salem 114, that's Salem, Portland area. Extremely hot in this area while we're struggling to get into the 70s in the high plains. That is why we have the excessive heat watches and warnings and heat advisories in the west, stalled out frontal boundary here for floods, heat advisories in the northeast. Next 5 days, that ridge does begin to open up. So can you see the warmth spreading farther to the east? But this area is expected to see temperatures over 20 degrees above average, while we are as much as 10 to 12 degrees cooler than normal here over parts of the high plains. From there, those 90-degree temperatures do spread into the northern tier of the United States, and we do expect this to really warm up as we get into that first full week of July. But it will start to hopefully back off in the extreme heat in the northwest. And unfortunately, before that happens, we'll see in the Columbia Basin evaporation rates exceed 4 inches a week. But you notice here as we get out there toward day 10, good, got the day new 12Z GFS in, or GFS ensemble. Day 10 through 15, less extreme heat here as it spreads a little bit farther to the east, at least the above average temperatures. How much? 5 to 10 degrees above normal here. So you notice that's very similar to what we've seen up to this point. And it seems as though that wants to last, because the pattern, as you look out into the longer term forecast from the European weeklies, which I talk about quite a bit more in the extended video, this is an area that I expect to stay wet. A lot of thunderstorm activity due to open Gulf moisture. Where that boundary is, that westward boundary, is going to be very challenging because we could see very dry conditions here as the jet stream kind of pulls into a western U.S. ridge, and those ridge runners come off the top of it here, fed on Gulf moisture, something we've been talking about. And I'll finish with this. This is through July into the beginning of August. That's what the temperature pattern is shaping up to look like. So check out the extended video for a few more details on the MJO and also on the atmospheric momentum, but I'll wrap it up there. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon. Thank you.